Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of Lit Happens Season 2 with Adriel. Hi, Adriel. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Bill. I think we're on episode 8, Bill. You're cutting us
Are
one short.
we? No way. Look at me underestimating us. All right, my apologies. Episode 8. Love that. Today's episode is going to be a Year 9 NAPLAN focus because if you listened last week, we did Year 7. So this will be a really good listen. You know, a lot of teachers around the state right now, high school teachers, are getting ready for the Year 9 NAPLAN in a sense because obviously we don't care that much about Year 7. That's sort of looked at as like the primary school sort of problem. So this will be really good. I think listeners will get some really good insights from you, Adriel, and even people who maybe are not super familiar, parents, students, new scheme teachers. There's going to be a lot of great info here. But before we get into our Year 9 NAPLAN episode, every week we do a little segment called Lit or Quit. So today's Lit or Quit is treating NAPLAN like it's the ultimate grammar police raid on your classroom, or quietly hoping that the spelling questions just disappear like a bad metaphor. What do you think, Angel? Is that a lit or is that a quit?
um, I think it's definitely lit. I love the premise of the question.
Yeah,
Now, look,
me
I
too.
I think 100%. It's we mentioned this in our last episode with Year 7. I think it's definitely great in terms of addressing some of the skills. But look, quietly, you do hope that some of it just disappear as a teacher, as we sort of do look at the exam. However,
Hmm.
in saying that, now in some of my 11 and 12 classes, when I look at the quality of spelling and just the general punctuation, grammar in particular, I think we definitely do need to look at addressing some of this. And NAPLAN is definitely one of those fundamental tools that allows us to really underscore this. So, yeah, look, treating it NAPLAN like it's the ultimate grammar police, I think we should. So I think that's probably lit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. It's definitely lit. I think it's
Yeah,
1000% lit. I'm a big fan. In my
100%.
head, I'm like, oh, when they're lining up to enter, if they get
Yeah,
a question wrong, well, back of the line, buddy. Like
yeah,
you are not worthy of this classroom if you do not know where the comma goes. Like I think it's great, like putting the
yeah,
onus on it. You probably have a lot of
yeah,
fun with it, right? And make it like
100%.
a less boring thing because it is boring.
Yeah,
Let's be honest. I'm bored when I have to teach it, and I always
yeah,
acknowledge that with the kids too. I think it's
yeah,
lit, definitely.
yeah.
I don't know. I
No,
feel
it's
like the
fantastic.
spelling questions, yeah, I feel like my guys are like 50-50 with vocab, but like anything like punctuation wise is always a big fail. They probably wish we got rid of those. They just don't know how to use them. But nonetheless,
Yeah,
I think if we all turned into grammar police, that would probably be a different story then, huh? We'd all be
yeah,
probably
a
mm.
100%, 100%. That's definitely true.
Love that. You guys as well listening at home, tell us what you think. Engage in our socials. Let us know. We might get into then our first question and kind of part of our episode today, Adriel, because I'm sure people are keen to listen to your insights. So the first thing we want to know is what do the components of the Year 9 NAPLAN exam look like for English and literacy? Because that's our focus, the literacy
Yeah,
sections. So what does it look
yeah,
like?
100%. So, like we sort of covered with our Year 7 episode, we have a reading section, we have a writing section, and then we do have that language and convention section as well. I'll just go over this very quickly and just keep in mind to all of our listeners, everything is run on NAP lockdown now. So, it no longer do we have the pieces of paper in front of us in the classroom. Everything is done online and on the computer. Okay, so the three key domains that we're looking at are reading, writing, and language convention. So grammar, spelling, punctuation, if you want to sort of translate that into a little bit of a simple way of looking at it. Our reading section is 50 questions, it's around 65 minutes. And students will read a mix of informative, imaginative, persuasive texts, which could cover things like a fiction, non-fiction, our
Mhm.
articles, our poems, and a lot of these questions are here to test the comprehension. So skills like inference, analysis, tone, main ideas, probably a big one, and then connecting ideas across some of those texts as well. So this is more complex than some of the earlier years that we might look at.
Yeah.
So we are understanding now with year 9, as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode. This is now a reflection of what we've been teaching in high school and where the students are
Mhm.
sort of moving towards. So yeah, look, it's some of those more important things that we do need to sort of look at. The writing section, generally you'll have one prompt. It is a 42-minute section here. Typically could be a persuasive response, so some form of opinion piece or a narrative of some sort. And this is where we're going to have our students crafting a response showing structure, ideas, development, and things like vocabulary, and then also those language conventions. And then we got our language conventions exam as well. So I think it's about 54, 60 questions. I think it's about 60
Mm.
questions, but 45 minutes in
Yeah.
length. This is multiple choice plus some spelling as well. So we're looking at grammar, so tense, syntax, word function. We're looking at punctuation, so things like commas, apostrophes, the use of italics, for example. And all of this sort of
Mhm.
aligns with the national curriculum that is run by ACARA. So NESA does sort of
Mhm.
attribute this to our schools in New South Wales, but it is a national examination. So everyone across Australia sits these NAPLAN exams. And I think one of the
Mhm.
things that we look at in terms of the exams, they're not just tests, but they're snapshots of literacy that will eventually feed into the HSC success if students do decide to pursue that moving forward. So it's a quick little breakdown. We covered this to a little bit more of an extent in our Year 7 examination, but that is roughly what is involved in our, what the exam sections involve in terms of each of those respective sections.
Yeah, that was really helpful and succinct. Thank you, Adriel. I think what you noted that is a really good takeaway is that level up from Year 5 and 7 into Year 9,
Yeah.
in terms of, yeah, the leveling up of the skills and what's demanded of the students. And also I think it was really helpful how you highlighted the time frames. So anybody listening can see that it's a fairly substantial test for,
Mm,
14, 15-year-olds. And I think that can potentially produce a lot of anxiety, but just reminding the kids, it's at least in Year 9 they've done this before multiple times.
mm,
It's sort of, I think, a lot scarier in those younger years because they haven't done it often. By Year 9 most kids are like, oh yeah, NAPLAN, like whatever. So
yeah.
yeah, I think it's good to remind them of that, like, yes, it's lengthy, but you've done this. It's
Yeah.
not a completely new thing. You know the drill. We just got to level up the
Mm,
skills here. All right,
mm,
that was
mm.
beautiful. Thank you. Well, let's get into our second question for the day that will be helpful for our listeners. So, focusing now, that was a lovely overview that you gave. Focusing now on the reading, writing, and language conventions, could you tell us a little bit more about what is in them and what to expect for Year 9 level of those literacy tests?
Yeah, awesome. So our reading section here, in this section, we're looking at how text combines sort of things like description,
Mm.
explanation, argument, narration, like the text types that the students will be exposed to. We'll look at a lot of these sorts of different skills. Again, it's an addressing of skills which students will have to address obviously through their typing online. And the questions here move beyond just the literal. Okay, this is where we look at this idea of inference, which we alluded to with our Year 7 episode. So inferring what the main idea is, and I remember this actually back when I was in high school a long time ago. There was a big sort of push to sort of make students
Yeah.
understand what inference was, and it was quite
Yes.
significant. So looking beyond the surface, looking beyond the literal, and looking at the deeper meaning. What are these ideas that could be reflected through the text? So yeah, inferring the main ideas in complex text is that step up now from the Year 7 NAPLAN exam for the reading section. I think also we're looking at things like identifying tone. We're looking at the feelings within the text as well, and this is through the looking of or the scope, sorry, or the lens of looking at the figurative language. You might be looking at the
Yeah.
dialogue within the respective texts. So it's quite significant for students to be able to read quickly, briefly, and then one of the things that we're going to be discussing in terms of the skills addressal next will be things like skim reading, looking for purpose in terms of the way that we read into some of these sections here. But yeah, look, that's the reading examination, and also the way that we connect
Mhm.
ideas across different passages as well. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's going to be quite
Yeah. That's a big
significant.
upgrade in skill. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
right.
What about in terms of the writing?
Yep. So when we look at the writing here, persuasive writing, I love this because I
Mm.
mean, for our senior English, you probably heard us discuss this previously, but we're looking at a clear sort of argument. What is a clear thesis that is presented? You'll be ramming this home if you're an English teacher in senior school. That word thesis, what is your main argument? So I think the NAPLAN has its merits here when it comes to addressing that persuasive text type there for us. And along with the clear thesis, we're looking at the way the arguments are supported by evidence, so examples, direct quotes from the text.
Mhm.
It's funny, this persuasive text here might also look at some of those rhetorical devices. So we do step away from like the essay form, and it's a little bit
Mm.
more informal in terms of when I say informal, it can be the fact that you can use rhetorical questions or emotive language within some of these persuasive pieces for
Yeah.
purpose, especially for the persuasive section in the exam. And something important to note, again, we'll expand on this a little bit further when we get into the skills section, but these are the things that the markers will be looking for. And
Mm.
if we can get our students to actually address or tick off these boxes like a checklist, they're definitely going to be well on their way to doing well in this section. The
Mhm.
narrative component, so if they do get a narrative component here, we're looking at how engaging the plot is. We're looking at character development, the way they use their descriptive language, and if they want to actually further that descriptive language, they're probably looking at the way that figurative language can be used, so language beyond just the literal descriptions of what is going on in the narrative plot. And then obviously you have your resolution denouement in your little piece that you are developing along with the narrative. Now, with the narrative, I often tell the students, just remember you're not doing a whole novel, happily ever after, once upon a time narrative
Yeah.
arc there. We're generally looking at a little sort of space here, and a lot of the teachers these days are teaching Freytag's pyramid. That one little part, one little moment in a narrative where you can still have
Yeah.
all of those components of the narrative within a nice, succinct structure. So that's important to sort of understand there. Um, but what we see for both of these sections is, they're both going to demand a control of structure, as we've sort of just alluded to, through, the intermingling of your thesis with your main ideas or your narrative arc, as I've just sort of touched on there,
Yeah.
along with vocabulary and then the conventions that are stated with each of these text types. So as
Yeah.
a teacher, you want to make sure that students understand the conventions of each respective form of writing there, whether it be persuasive or narrative, which are the two uh, important written sort of sections that students may be asked to address with this section. And again, they've only got 42 minutes, as we've mentioned before. What can students type? It's funny, I'm saying write, but what can they type up in
Mhm.
42 minutes?
Yeah.
That is the skill that they are trying to address there. So just be mindful of that. I know in classrooms, the irony is, in the HSC, we're not typing anything up, and we really do emphasize writing
Yeah.
with our students. However, over here, we're starting to understand, typing is important for NAPLAN. So just be mindful of that if you're a student, if you're a teacher teaching this as
Too.
well.
Yeah.
So language conventions as well, the exam here, this is where we're looking at spelling, we're looking at the common errors, so things like suffixes, prefixes. You might even look at things like homophones. We look at grammar, tense, consistency. So looking at parts of speech, comparatives, and also punctuation. So your sentences, your commas, clausals. I like this idea of the clausal structure. So the build-up of different
Yeah.
types of sentences as well for students to really, really understand. Um, so yeah, it's funny. I've seen some students. Often ace the content for these sections, especially reading, writing, but then, the basic sort of punctuation is where they can often fall. So
Mm.
if you're a teacher here, you might have targeted mini lessons on language conventions in particular in order for them
Mhm.
to really thrive in. I know at my current school or my place of employment, we've got a whole NAPLAN course on, or literacy course on Canvas, in which the students will spend one lesson maybe every week or so, or every fortnight, in which they address this. So something like that, a mini lesson that addresses different skills as part of NAPLAN, will definitely be important. But it'll probably lead us into our next section, in which we will probably start to look at some of those
Yeah.
skills.
Thank you. That was really good and very thorough. And I think listeners who might have also tuned into last week's U7, they'll note that there's an increase here in the complexity, that a lot of these complex skills were being introduced in Year 7, but now that there's an assumption that these students know how to use these complex skills within context, particularly when you're looking at all those things you described in terms of not just text type, but the nuances in like the style and the
Yeah,
conventions, and that plays a big role here. So that was
yeah,
really, really helpful for year nine teachers, just to note that you're engaging. It's a good reflection too to note, are you engaging in that complexity in your own
yeah.
lessons, not just in the lead up, but in general. So that was really,
Mm,
really good. Thank you.
mm.
Well, let's look at then the next part, which is all about the skills. So you've given us that deep insight in terms of what's going on in the exam. So what specific skills do you think the students need to be employing and that need to be addressed so that they can hit all those aspects in the NAPLAN paper for year nine?
Yeah, awesome. So again, let's start off with our reading skills here, and we had a lot of importance placed on this idea of inference. So inferencing is quite important for our Year 9 students. It's not just what the literal meaning is in a text that they may read. It's actually looking at a text, looking at the context, looking at the ideas within the text, and really getting an idea like of the meaning beyond just the surface level literal meaning. And this is something that can be addressed through. We mentioned this with our Year 7 episode, where if you're at home and you're a parent looking to improve your young boy or girl sort of skill in Year 9 here, get them to maybe read a passage and get them to
Mhm.
tell you, well, what are the ideas beyond just the literal? And
Yeah.
students, the more they practice this, the better they're going to get. If you're in class, if you read separate passages, what is the deeper meaning? What is the
Yeah.
inferences that we can make in terms of the passages that we're reading? So you're not necessarily reading multiple lengthy documents or text types, but just key, short, sharp paragraphs, I think is very important because this is sort of what they're going to receive
Mhm.
in the NAPLAN. And it's a fantastic skill, as I said, that will also be a foundational skill when it comes to their senior English later on. Um,
Absolutely.
identifying identifying main ideas and themes, that's very, very important as well. So getting the students to understand, well, what is the purpose? What is the didactic purpose or authorial intent? Which moves us into this next part. Once we identify what it is, then we can analyze the author's purpose through their tone or looking at like those
Mhm.
ideas of tone, rhythm. Why do they put certain things in to sort of achieve that didactic purpose or authorial intent, which is very, very
Yeah.
important when it comes to the reading section. Allowing
Mhm.
students to connect ideas between texts and through text as well. So not just looking or becoming so tunnel vision where you're just looking at one idea, but looking at multiple ideas as well and looking at the way that they connect. I think that's quite important.
Yeah.
Reading as well, if you're looking at figurative text, there's things like poems, for example. We're looking at interpreting
Mhm.
figurative language and the meaning beyond. And then I think the most important thing is looking at vocab in context. Context shapes meaning, context shapes understanding, and if we can continually allow our students to understand how we continue to develop understanding through context. I think that's quite significant. But that's the
Mhm.
reading skills that we want addressed, or just a few of the important ones. We've got written skills
Yeah.
as well. So for the writing section, obviously planning and structure is very, very important. So introductions, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion. I know in this day and age, students still write like a big block of writing. I
Yeah.
don't know how many times I want to sort of encourage students to
Yeah.
make sure you're using your
Yeah.
paragraphs. And paragraphs aren't just the 4 sentences that they learn in primary school either. So important for us to teach this skill and address this skill as teachers and students. Remember, make sure you make use of, you understand what goes into an introduction, what goes into each of your body paragraphs, what goes into your conclusion when you are typing
Mhm.
this up in the written component. Um,
Mhm.
we also want to teach the developing of ideas with evidence. So anytime you make a claim, for example, in a persuasive text, you are supporting it with clear, direct quotes, so direct evidence from the respective text. Now, this may be difficult when you might not be given a text. Maybe you're given a proposition of some sort. Now, this is where you
Mm.
might use your inferential knowledge and look at, okay, what are some of the statistics that I might use to help my argument? And you put that in as
Yeah.
quotes or ideas that you've heard or researched previously, just in your day to day sort of life. And we sort of touched on this in Year 7 in the Year 7 episode. We're looking at the holistic learning of the student. Where they're at in terms of the literacy course. So this is quite significant. Varied sentences and sentence structures, very, very important. I always start off with, simple stuff with my students because they start off simple. They understand that each sentence is conveying some piece of meaning. And if they understand what they're saying, then you can move on to, making them extended, maybe more complex sentences. But that goes back to
Hmm.
that drafting process that we discussed in our previous sort of episode. Um,
Yeah.
Using precise vocabulary, editing for clarity, like these are the important things as well. And these are the things that the markers in the NAPLAN written examination will look for,
Yeah.
which is very significant for us to actually look at when addressing the skills required for students. And then finally, we've got our language conventions. So things like accurate spelling. So we're looking at rules, the patterns, the grammar, making sure that we have sentence variety, the agreements. So, the clausal agreements there, the subject verb agreements that we might teach. And I know we do emphasize this quite a bit these days. Um, I think also, punctuation for meaning and effect, making sure the clarity is there, the cohesion is there, and also addressing
Mm.
proofreading habits for our students, making sure that you're
Yeah.
proofreading everything. It's very, very important. I think one of the big things that we do need to actually address as well is time management. Now, this skill translates later on to the HSEs as well, because it's not a overall testament of your overall knowledge, the NAPLAN exams either. It's how well you perform under pressure and under time conditions as well. So, giving them skills
Yes.
on how to maybe approach different sections, multiple choice, for example, could be left towards the end as it might be something where you can just tick a box A, B, C, or D, and move forward from there. It's a lot quicker to get through it if you are running short on time, especially if maybe with your shorter response questions, you might take a little bit longer. So, daily reading summaries, peer editing. I think the grammar drills also. So just a lot of these skills need to be touched on by teachers and students alike and families alike in order for students to do well in these sections of the exam.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You've got so much depth there, not just in ideas for teachers, but also you're giving that deep understanding to parents as well and students in terms of what to expect in there. And it does alleviate pressure when you've got that specific guidance. So
Mm,
lots of great ones there. Thank you, Adriel.
mm.
Well, can we talk a little bit about then literary and stylistic techniques? So
Yep.
which of these should students have a really good understanding of before they enter this year 9 exam? Because we did talk about how it's a bit of a level up from year 7. So, what are your
Yeah.
suggestions here on maybe a little bit of a list potentially of what they should
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I've got a few sort of simple ones here. Like in year nine, we're
Hmm.
moving beyond descriptive language in particular.
Hmm.
We're looking more at the figurative language technique. So make sure your students understand what metaphors are, similes, personification, hyperbole, imagery. Like these are just five simple techniques that they can take in with them into sorry, they can take with them into the exam,
Hmm.
that will more than likely be in each of those maybe narrative type texts or figurative type texts. So I would separate it into lists of five. So for figurative language, metaphor, simile, personification, hyperbole, imagery. So how do these techniques influence the reading of certain texts and then to meaning? Make sure the students understand that. So not only are they to just identify the technique, we give them the list, but how are they used as well? That's going to be very important. For persuasive devices, again, if they come across a persuasive text type, you're looking at things like rhetorical questions. You might look at emotive language, repetition, alliteration, anecdotes, maybe even statistics. So, and I've given six or so um, techniques there. But again, just these simple five or so techniques that they can take in with them, which is very, very important. That, okay, cool, this looks like a rhetorical question. This is what it's used for.
Yeah,
Makes it very, very easy. And that's honestly what the NAPLAN markers will be looking for. They can identify the technique and they understand how it's used. And they've got a quote,
yeah,
that's your 3 marks. Nice and easy if it's a short answer question there. Generally, they're 1 mark questions. So literally, if you literally just highlight one of these techniques and understand its use, you're getting the mark.
hmm,
Um,
yeah,
then you've got other textual features. So things like tone, point of view, bias, vocabulary choices, and like there's just so much to talk about. Even language conventions, understanding syntax for effects, so punctuation for emphasis, the use of dashes, commas, full stops, italics. Like, make sure students
Yeah.
have a good understanding of these things before the exam. We might put a list in the show notes just for our listeners. If you are wanting to just make a list of this, we'll put this in the show notes just for you guys to um, have something to start off with and really take into your
Mhm,
teaching and also making sure that the
mhm.
students really do understand this clearly. But yeah, those are probably the key techniques. Again, you don't need a world of techniques. Just make sure they understand 5 or 6 simple ones for each of those respective areas that I've mentioned. So the figurative
Yeah,
ones, the persuasive ones, the narrative techniques, features as well, and conventions. Um, you'll start to see the more you practice it, the better the students will get with retaining it as well.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
that's where I'll be
No,
at
that's
in terms of those techniques.
No, those are really useful because you can start on that basic level of just definition and example, and then moving towards getting students to create their own examples so they can put them in context. So that is
Mm,
a great, simple, but highly effective strategy there. Thank you so much for addressing those. Just a last question then for you, Adriel. You have covered a lot. Thank you. I know a lot of year nine teachers are like, okay, I've got a bit of a list now to work off of. What are some just final preparation tips or any final comments you might have about the Year 9 literacy exam?
yeah, yeah. I know this is probably going to go counter to what I've said, and it depends on your school setting. But there's a few suggestions here.
Mhm,
So you might look to
mhm,
integrate NAPLAN, prep into your regular
mhm.
English sort of units of work. And I know some places do this. Others will do it separately. Like I said, my current place of employment does have like specific courses separately where we will dedicate one literacy lessons. And I know where we worked previously, we used to have that as well. But
Yeah.
there is no need for separate sort of drill units. You can definitely use past papers. You can definitely embed it into your units. It's just depending on your school setting, how
Yes.
you sort of approach that. So that's the first little tip there. There's no right or wrong to the way that you introduce NAPLAN prep. Just make sure you go along with what your school is doing. I think the second thing is to build confidence. So just regular practice, encouraging students with a growth mindset. It's about showing what you know. I think this is the question that we want to continue. It's not just a be all and end all. NAPLAN's going to end you sort of doom and
Mm,
gloom situation here.
mm,
This is just about showing what you know, where you're at, and how we can continue to
mhm.
improve. And it's a
Yeah.
good diagnostic tool for teachers as well. So for teachers, I think this is probably a big one that we've stepped away from in recent years, and I know I'm trying to embed this a little bit more into my own pedagogy, but making sure we're modeling
Mhm,
annotations for things like reading, maybe co-constructing persuasive text with our students, and also
mhm.
making sure we're fixing grammar and correcting it straight away. I know students sometimes like to, well, especially like the quicker students in work, they'll rush through work and then they'll forget simple things like capital letters or full stops. And for me
Yes.
personally, I'll make them go rewrite the whole thing again. Making sure that
Yeah.
they think about it next time. Make sure you're not
Yeah, they
making
don't
the
cut
same
corners.
mistakes.
Mm,
That's right.
mm,
Oh, but sir, like I can just go change. No, no, go write it again because we're not rushing.
yeah.
We're not cutting corners. We are,
Yeah.
trying to teach you these fundamental skills.
Yeah, a
In terms of
process and
well-being,
embed a good habit.
yeah,
Sorry,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. No, you're right. In terms of well-being, we're just balancing this preparation with fun.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be something that burns you out, and it shouldn't be something that is the be all and end all. Like I said, doom and gloom. It's about looking at future, like we sort of discussed with our little quit. Um, we have our own views and personal sort of biases when it comes to the function or the purpose of NAPLAN. But I think when we look
Mhm.
at the skills that it addresses, I think there is a lot of merit to it, especially when it comes to senior English
Yes.
as well. So,
Yes. Yeah.
understanding that, getting students to understand future sort of purpose and focus there is quite significant. And also, guys, like, we'll be putting a few resources up as well. So feel free to click the little QR code in the top corner here where you'll get our links to our Lit Happens website, so lithappensse.com, and you'll see our Teachers Pay Teachers website as well, or association there, and see some cheat sheets there that we have that may help you as well with helping with NAPLAN as well. So there's a few final preparation tips. I know we've given a slight little plug there towards the end, but yeah, that's about it, Bill. It's a nice, quick, short,
Yeah.
sharp episode for your nine, but
No, I think
yeah,
that's great. I love your final emphasis on keeping it fun and light, because I know, people might be listening and thinking, well, I've got a student or I've got a child who, every time that plan
Mm,
comes, is adamant that they don't want to do it. And I know I can imagine, like, as a parent, what that's like, because you might say, well, who cares? Why do they have to sit it? Like, if it's going to
yeah,
cause them stress. But maybe if we're all going in with that light and fun, then the child will sit it, because it is important. Like, it gives a lot of information for your teachers and your schools.
yeah.
And when there are gaps in their NAPLAN results, it sometimes makes it hard to make really fine-tuned strategies. And
Mm,
also,
mm,
I think it's a good example of just teaching our kids to try their best. You know,
yeah,
try and eliminate that pressure, that we want to remove that it's a be all end all. It's not, then they get to senior years, it never even matters really anymore.
yeah, yeah.
um, Other than all the skills obviously they've picked up, that's transferable, that
Mm,
definitely matters. But the actual result itself, becomes one of those
yeah,
things that over time is really not a be all end all. I think if we're reminding our kids, yeah. But I love that, balancing the preparation and the explicit
mm,
clarity around it with fun and ease, and just trying your best, that growth mindset.
yeah,
I think that's a great takeaway for this lesson. Thank you
yeah.
so much, Adrielle. You've been a wealth of knowledge here, lots of good tips and strategies for our teachers. And as Adriel mentioned, you can click onto that QR code, or you can take a look at our other social media platforms to get, resources, guides, information that we've been putting together aside from our regular day jobs. And we just really hope that, we're helping and we're alleviating,
Mm,
because that's like the aim here. So yeah, take a look. And as always, email us, contact us, let us know what you're thinking. If you have any suggestions on future episodes or just comments you want to make, we'd love to get some in that we can read on our future podcast episodes and engage with our community as well. So thank you so much. Anything else on your end, Adriel?
no, all good. Just make sure you comment for us and like and subscribe. Continue supporting us. We love doing this. And we'll see you
Thank
guys in the
you.
next episode.